Yeah. I was wanting to talk a little more about HillSong, Oceans Deep. And it's kind of like, I think about that, and Madonna, Papa Don't Preach, I'm in trouble deep. Somewhere in my mind, Madonna's like connected automatically with just that one word, deep. And somehow in my mind, HillSong singing that song, Oceans Deep, deep being 30. And I had my thing about, excuse me, Vantage Low 30. Or the secret de facto 30. Oceans Deep, it presents information. It's almost like Oceans Deep, referring to, on the front lines of the beachfront, predominantly thinking about being shallow, predominantly even on the sand, being barefoot in the footprint. Ultimately, the birth certificate would seem to be the carbon footprint, of international financial management, international banking systems, and absentee voting thing about, somewhere between, in my mind, if it's some accusation is not the excuse, but the only thing that seems to be what is used is some idea, of television programming, or some idea as a deed restriction. In any case, though, it seemed to be the thing about Vantage Low 30, and even that song by HillSong, Oceans Deep, because it seemed to be the thing about where the spore stone comes in, that's used in orthopedic surgery. And the phrase, it's like Oceans Deep where feet may fail, it seemed to be the thing, really, at the time of a birth certificate, when footprints are actually put on a birth certificate. Yet at the same time, based on my experience, really because of the baptism marking, a 28-year thing in 1992. And I'd mentioned a little earlier about, all the rectangles on the United States map as restricted areas, the one and only year. And ultimately, the initials of restricted area being RA and like 19, or COVID ID 19. But in my mind, it's kind of like, I'm almost for certain, I have met people and not even realized, certain factors of like, how it seemed to be like, a certain word here or there, and ultimately, even, thinking that in my mind that singing it's like almost distinguishedly a little bit characterized a little bit more based upon memory sometimes of people that are involved with like audio production or recording. And that seems to be like one of the songs. The thing about HillSong is like it's in Australia, okay? And the thing about Brian Houston in Australia is his name simply being Houston. Brian Houston. Predominantly he was, I don't know what his involvement necessarily is like right now in the year 2025, but he was like one of the predominant factors of one of the preachers involving, Australia and HillSong is Brian Houston. And the thing with this is now that that song Oceans Deep, it seemed to be now, the thing about the similarities of accent and a person that I had met. I know that like I myself, I'm a singer, and like whatever I like listening to, I normally like singing anyway. And likewise, in addition, being a drummer, it's automatic. Singing and playing my drums is like automatic. Anyway. But it seems to be, like a whole bunch of singers that are the same way, having the similarities within vocal range that they choose for themselves. I'm assuming that most people that like listen to, audio production and, music to the extent of a preference based upon their own vocal range, or maybe in my case really not limited to at all, because I'm a drummer. Singers might be more so within description of vocals, but with me being a drummer and a singer, it's kind of like not limited to only vocals. Me being a drummer is probably both, but kind of a variant. I wouldn't really call it a compromise, but each individual to their own, preferences, the way it is. Yeah, so like that one song of HillSong, Ocean's Deep, it seemed to be really the thing about, the footprint at the time of birth. Because of that one phrase is kind of like really kind of almost like in my mind, like almost like Papa Don't Preach, I'm in trouble deep. It's almost like HillSong and that song and Brian Houston. Almost, the secrets of the temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country in practical application and principle. In a whole different perspective. And any similarity of a triangle at this point, it's like, like I knew all that information, but the connectivity, it's just like happening, like while I'm talking. It's almost like, a German-owned, a European-owned, German-owned mining for raw diamonds in South Africa has all that practical application of, Johannesburg, yet it presents the alphanumerics of 130 as Johannesburg in television, an electronic god, and telepathic map, and all of a sudden it presents, television to, like, Washington, and Washington, D.C., and all of a sudden it's the United States, and it's like, in the Houston area. All that information, based upon Europe being above the equator, it's like Washington, D.C. being above the equator. And all that European, German-owned mining for raw diamond in South Africa, it's just like, Washington, D.C. And the thing about, I-10 and, like, computer language and binary numbers almost, it's almost like I-10 representing, region 1 and region 0 and the equator, that way in the Houston area. And the operator. Thing with this is that Brian Houston, the thing about HillSong, and it's almost like now, like in addition, a Nelson song, After the Rain. God, it goes on and on about these bands. Somewhere in my mind about the connectivity, and realizing a lot of bands are singing about each other's songs, doing a lot of communication that way. I'm fixing to lose my light. I can't believe it's kind of hard to believe it. I haven't been running a generator that long, but here it goes. It's fixing to go out, so I better get a little bit of light here real quick. So, like, hopefully I can find my light without having to stop. Oh, man. So, here it goes, yeah. Okay, yeah, there it is. So I'm gonna have to take a break. I think I'm gonna go ahead and finish this part right here and just use this light right here. Because it seemed to be that HillSong, okay, and that song Ocean's Deep, it presents where feet may fail. It seemed to be the thing about Madonna's Papa Don't Preach, I'm in trouble deep, and at the same time it's like Vantage Love 30, and it has all that connectivity like Sydney, Australia, in HillSong, and it gets to the thing about it seemed to be the Bureau of Vital Statistics, in that way of the birth certificate at the time the footprints were actually put on a birth certificate, and where feet may fail will be probably the Humorus, and something like that happening, while I was going through the Stargate program, being gassed while I was asleep and fumigated, and only discovering, months later, because it was like an intense, really 6 to 9 month period, maybe an entire year, with some idea of like neutrality and representing like Geneva, Switzerland in the being venue. I'm actually trying to grasp some kind of memory in linguistic alphanumeric way about neutrality in the summit meetings and the being venue that way of Geneva, Switzerland. But in any case, so it seemed that one song of HillSong presenting Ocean's Deep where feet may fail seemed to be just that one word deep being 30, or Vantage Love 30, Sacred De Facto 30. Where feet may fail, it seemed to be the only thing about, that involving, the footprint at the time of birth, and what would normally be, the normal length of the humerus bone, would be my thought of Ocean's Deep, where feet may fail. It seemed to be the thing about really the idea of humerus bone, and something that had actually taken place, and 4 inches of my humerus bone on both my arms had been removed. I didn't even know I'd been operated on. I didn't see any scars, but there's like, a 6 to 9 month period that now seem to be that's possibly maybe even an entire year during predominantly around the year 1995, going through, the Circuit and Stargate program. And the thing with this is that that one song about the HillSong connecting like Sydney, Australia, and it seemed to be the thing about, the Japanese yen and Sydney and the SID number going through like something like Harris as a SID, and automatically in my mind it's like Sydney, Australia, and Disney and like the Japanese yen, and now it's kind of like the HillSong Oceans Deep, and it presents all that information of Sydney, Australia that way in my mind, and linking, the connectivity in my mind of like Brian Houston in the Houston area as compared to the book Secrets of the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country. And it ultimately provides a bunch of information with several other books that presents, the connectivity between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, more so of I-10, seemingly the eccentric triangle thing about the screensaver bouncing from, like from side to side, two of them. And it presents the eccentric thing about, really the structure of the building of a state, federal, and local authority deal about, like County Road 45 in Angleton, Texas. The way it's designed is called A-row. And the cells are like symmetrical, asymmetrical, back-to-back, what would be, like sometimes you'll see, people, standing back-to-back representing the HTTP : // And the thing about the colon being, the idea of a ratio, or the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi that way. And once again, it seemed to be getting to the thing about the ISS and the SSI and the International Superstar, and supplemental security income, and the ISS and SSI and a PPI, and I mentioned a little bit earlier about the HMO being like the euro, the H and the M being like 21, and the L improper English numerical composition with the P being visible and pronounced like it is in county and country, and being visible and silent would be like it being invisible in practical application with the R between the HMO being the UO and the euro dollar. So I'm going to probably spend a little bit of time, in that way, but it seemed to be the connectivity in my mind, what would be of the Secrets to the Temple, How the Federal Reserve Runs the Country, and, several books, including Nimitz Class and Turbulent Waters, and the movements that seem to be, in sets of three of like the aggregates of monetary domestic gross national product, that represent importing and exporting, that presents the huge triangle. More so, predominantly, it seemed to be in coordination with like the New York Stock Exchange, and movements that would represent the aggregates of monetary, domestic, and gross national product. Yet at the same time, issues of the information involving the Secrets of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country, importing and exporting in a way between the Persian Gulf and the Mediterranean, as well as like I-10, what it is. And it seemed to be the symmetrical, asymmetrical design of the, state, federal, and local authorities, like structure, such as like, County Road 45 on Angleton, Texas, and that screensaver with the eccentric triangles, only two of them bouncing off, each side of the wall on the monitor. And it seemed to be, the thing about the symmetrical, asymmetrical design of like a telepathic blueprint on a wall, only because of like two triangles under a shelf on the exact opposite side, and just using a pen, ultimately being two like absolute vertical lines. And then from then on, it seemed to be, like it was just like a bunch of like calculated alignments, and ultimately, on one portion of the wall, after that, it seemed to be, like five eccentric triangles overlapping each other. And, the exact opposite in reading it analytically and symbolically is like Lockheed Martin's, think about the two arrows, the four lines, and the three intersecting axes. Yet in the exact opposite way, between Lockheed Martin and the five eccentric triangles, reading that certain part about it is the exact opposite of a 2-3-2 in my mind, like an atonement, sounding like, Green Acres, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The 2-3-2 thing is like the 323, the last area code. I think it's the last area code of Los Angeles area. Code is 323. And all the alphanumerics of like Los Angeles, being the alphanumerics of 109, or the area code 213. But the thing about Los Angeles is kind of like it's also like YouTube or Governor. And the thing about M is in practical application, like Governor's President, 109 is 110. The alphanumerics is 247, but alternated and not really substituted, but using the area code of Los Angeles, 213, is 110. It's likewise alphanumerically like the last area code of Los Angeles area of 323. There's several issues like analytically of like just a telepathic blueprint on a wall using a legal pad. Only because of two triangles in my mind, you know, being the delta force or a pi r squared or E equal mc squared, and the biggest mouth of the river, ultimately an electronic schematic symbol of the triangle and the 6-point star, the Israeli flag. But in any case, it started off with like two vertical lines as absolute values. And it seemed to be that it had led to, you know, the fifth dimension song Up in the Air in a Beautiful Balloon. And once again, Orion performance monitoring. And, you know, the mandatory requirements of a rainbow. But anyway, I kind of lost my power, and I need to put some more gas in the generator. But I want to include this real quick before I stop. Is a thing about Oceans Deep, that song by HillSong. And it seemed to be, you know, a thing about Baptist Love 30 and Sacred Facto 30 because of the thing about in Oceans Deep where feet may fail. It seemed to be the thing about the spore stone and Humorus bone. Similarly, now, you know, that had happened, you know, while I was asleep. And I mean, I realized that it happened. But I mean, any indication that remembering anything or seeing anything noticeable or realizing in any kind of way that I'd been operated on and I didn't even realize it. I mean, I noticed that I had to lean from side to side and there was a difference in reach and all that. I mean, but the connectivity of actually being operated on and not even realizing or even being told or a foreknowledge or anything, and just realizing how could that happen, you know, like without me not knowing it. But ultimately, it almost seems to be almost like that HillSong song, Oceans Deep, where feet may fail. It seemed to be the difference of the Bureau of Vital Statistics at the time of, you know, when a newborn child's footprint is put on a birth certificate, and the approximate length of the humerus bone being approximately 4 inches, or what the forecast is in WE International, as compared to the weather. You know, it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like, hey, Acura, like, where you at? Okay, it's kind of like, yeah, Acura, you maybe something like really good and productive needs to like or really get in gear about the Acura. Oh, there's Acura. Oh my God, there's Acura. Yeah, and GMC's racing a bar. Oh yeah, great. All right, yeah. So like in any case, yeah. So like it seemed to be that has significance of you know, the experience and the amendments. You know, like I said, just to mention it real quick, is that the World News and National News predominantly use the word mending with that spore stone, and I don't believe I may have heard it and not realized it. Although spore stone in my mind is a categorization. It's actual medical terminology and practical application in modern medical orthopedic surgery. I'm not sure if it's actually identified as a specific name. I only know it would seem to be only the category of the spore stone that's used in orthopedic surgery. I'm not sure if that information has actually even been given. It may have been, but at the time, I mean, the significance isn't like anywhere near like what it is now, okay? So, I mean, it seemed to be that one deal about, you know, connecting Sydney, Australia, and Harris, and all the alphanumerics of, you know, Egypt and Oceans Deep and Sydney and the SID and the Sydney, Australia, the yen, the Japanese yen, and, you know, the thing about the SID and going through like Harris and all that information, even Disney, I mean, for real. And the alphanumerics, ultimately, you know, Disney being 76 or capital, and how that gets to the human capital. You know, even the alphanumerics of Disney and all that information right there, it seemed to be, it presents the triangle, what is it, apparently, movement representing like the aggregates of monetary domestic gross national product in the New York Stock Exchange of importing and exporting. Yet, if there's a power and principle side, powers and principalities in high places, it seemed to be more so like a importing and exporting involving, you know, international banking systems and all that information. But anyway, you know, I'm going to have to go put a little bit more gas in the generator. I didn't think I'd lose it. I thought I had another 3 hours for real. I hadn't really been paying attention to how much time has gone by, but I mean, it should have been an automatic, like 5 hours of gas in there, So anyway, I'm gonna kind of like take a break and maybe I'll have enough gas. Maybe hopefully I'll cover everything. I'm gonna listen to this and upload it real quick and make sure that I've covered everything predominantly about that HillSong song Ocean's Deep, where feet may fail us, seem to be the thing. Yeah, really about the birth certificate and the footprint, and ultimately at the time of birth, the 4 inches, which I'm assuming is predominantly approximately the length of the humerus bone, and what that is in relation, and all that stuff about GMC, talking about raising the bar and all that information. So anyway, there it is right there, and yeah, I'm gonna put some gas in the generator, and there it is. Okay, all right.